We're starting to take a look at angles today. So let's just jump right in here. We're going to talk about types of angles, and these are things that you should have learned back in elementary school, but it's worth reviewing, and we'll get into some stuff maybe you don't know as we move through the lesson here. So first of all, just some basic types of angles. We have an acute angle, which is an angle that is less than 90 degrees. And I want you to draw these in with me here. A 90-degree angle is a perfect corner. Maybe we should draw that in first. That's a right angle. So it's like if you have a line that is exactly a vertical line and a line that is exactly a horizontal line. Now you could tilt those and it would still be a 90-degree angle, but the idea is it makes a perfect corner. A lot of times you put a little box in the corner there to show that it is in fact a right angle. So an angle that is less than that is called an acute angle, and for those it can be anything that is just like if you had a line that was horizontal and a line that's less than straight up and down. So that's an acute angle. And then we have our right angle. For an obtuse angle, it's anything that's between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. So it's greater than a right angle, but less than what we'll talk about here with a straight angle here in a minute. So let's say you have your horizontal line again, but it's more wide open than one that's vertical. So it'd be something like this. Really anything in between straight up and down here and side to side there. So that would be an obtuse angle. Then you have what's known as a straight angle. It's exactly 180 degrees. We actually talked about this a little bit when we were talking about transformations. So you have this your vertex here, the point where the two lines meet, technically there. And it's going to make a straight line altogether though. So it's open up 80 degrees here. So this is 90, all the way down though, like this is 180 degrees. We probably should put arrows at the end of each one of these here. That's really how we'll see those most of the time. All right, so those are just your different types of angles, and it's going to be important for us to know those as we move on here and work with angles for the next few days. All right, vocabulary, the point where the sides of an angle meet is called a vertex. So you have a vertex here, 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 and here with these angles that we talked about. Having the same measure, instead of saying like in algebra when two things are the same, we say that they're equal. But in geometry, we say that they're congruent if they're the same measure. All right, let's talk about a couple things maybe that you're not as aware of when it comes to angles. We're talking about different types of pairs of angles that go together. So two angles are vertical angles. I'll fill that in the box there. If they are opposite angles formed by the intersection of two lines, vertical angles are congruent. So we're going to write a couple pairs of vertical angles in here. So they're just angles basically that are across from each other, and they have the same measure. So for example here, angles 2 and angle 4 are directly across from each other. So angle 2, and when we write angle, instead of writing the word angle, we can write this symbol here, which is just kind of an acute angle there. It stands for the word angle. So angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical angles. See if you can see the other pair of vertical angles. So even though they're not up and down from each other, they're across from each other, so we still call these vertical angles here. So angle 1 and angle 3. Those are the only pairs of vertical angles here in this. Okay, another type of angles, another type of pair of angles that we're going to talk about. Two angles are adjacent. Adjacent is just a word that means next to. If you were trying to give someone directions somewhere, like to the post office or something, you might say, oh, you know, it's down the road down there adjacent to the grocery store or whatever. It just means next to. Kind of a fancy word for that. So two angles are adjacent if they share a common vertex, a common side, and do not overlap. All these angles share this common vertex right here, where the sides of these angles meet right there. They have to share a common side as well, but they can't overlap. So basically just angles that are next to each other. For example, angles 1 and 2. See, they share this common vertex. They share this side right here, and they're two angles that are right next to each other. So angle 1 and angle 2. Another pair of vertical or adjacent angles, are angles 3 and 4. Now, there are actually 2 more pairs of adjacent angles. See if you can pick them out and write them down. We got angles 2 and 3 that are also right next to each other. That's a different combination we haven't made yet. And then angles 1 and 4. So those are all your adjacent angle pairs, just angles that are next to each other. Now, I want you to go ahead and do this with me real quick because we're going to have some questions on this on the assignment that you guys have. I want you to draw this in with me here. I want you to make an X, and then I want you to go ahead and draw a line straight down through there as well, creating 6 angles, because you're going to see this, like I said, on your assignment. Start with this one that's up here on the top towards the right and label that one number 1, and then just go around clockwise and number them 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now we have 6 angles this time instead of just 4 like we saw above here. There's going to be a section on your assignment that says, name if each angle pair is adjacent, vertical, or neither. And so as you look at this, you can see things like, for example, adjacent angles would be like 1 and 2, right? They're right next to each other. They share a common side. So if I said, what kind of angles are angles 1 and 2? You'd say adjacent. If you match up, say 1 and 4, see how they're directly across from each other right there? If I said, what kind of relationship do angles 1 and 4 have? You would say that those are vertical angles. And finally, angles that, like angles 1 and 3, they're not directly across from each other. They're not right next to each other, so they're neither one of those. So you'd write neither for the combination of angles 1 and 3. So if you see on your assignment today, name what each pair of angles is, if it's adjacent, vertical, or neither. Hopefully this will give you a little bit of a better idea of how that works. All right, let's flip over to the back and let's do a little bit of practice with these here. One of the other things we're going to do today, besides just know the types of angles, are being able to name angles. So name the angle in 4 ways, then classify the angle. Classify the angle as acute, right, or obtuse. It says to classify the angle R. It should say classify the angle as acute, right, or obtuse. So there's 4 different ways to name an angle, and so we're going to go through those, and then we're going to decide whether or not it's an acute right angle, or obtuse angle. So first of all, the first way is to use the vertex as the middle letter and a point from each side as you do this. So you could label this angle, and then the vertex has to be the middle letter, but we can start with a point on each side, and we could say that this is angle X, Y, Z. So write that in. Or you could go the other way with it and start with Z. As long as the vertex is your middle letter, you could also go the other direction and say angle Z, Y, X. Like that. But you can't say X, Z, Y because that doesn't create the angle we're trying to talk about. You got to go, if you think about where you start and then go to the vertex and then from there, that vertex always has to be the middle letter there. So that's 2 ways so far, just in number 1. Number 2, you can use the vertex only, as long as you only have 1 angle coming off that vertex. Now, if I added one here and said that this was point B, for example, we couldn't just label this angle Y anymore because you've got 2 angles coming off of it. But if it's the only angle from that vertex, you can use just angle Y. And then sometimes there'll be a number inside the angle, like we saw on the other side of the page there. You can name the angle just according to that number, so angle 1. So there's 4 different names for this angle that we can come up with. The 3-letter names there, just the vertex only, or the number. And then we got to classify if the angle is acute, right, or obtuse. This looks like an angle that is less than 90 degrees, so it is acute. All right, let's do a little practice with this as we wrap things up today. It says name each angle in 4 ways, then classify the angle as acute, right, obtuse, or straight. Some of these could be a straight angle as well. So number 1, I'm not sure if we'll do all of these. We'll just kind of see how things go. But number 1, and we're going to name it in 4 ways. We're going to call that angle, and then we can do the 3-letter names first. MNP, angle PNM. You can also just name it according to the vertex only, angle N, and just according to the number inside there, angle 1. And then we got to say what type of angle this is. This looks like it's a straight angle. I'm sorry, not a straight angle, an obtuse angle. Oops. Okay, number 2. We got, we'll go ahead and name this in 4 ways. This is angle RST. Angle, and we go the other direction there as long as the vertex is in the middle, TSR. Angle vertex only, angle S, or angle 3. So the number inside it or just the vertex only. That looks like that's an acute angle. Alright, I want you to see if you can go and pause the video and do numbers 3 and 4 on your own. You guys kind of have an idea here of how to name these angles in 4 different ways and classify what they are. So go ahead and try numbers 3 and 4 on your own. Let's go over the answers now. So angle ABC, angle CBA, angle B, vertex only, and angle 1, the number inside there. And this is an obtuse angle, looks like. Number 4, we have the 3-letter names here. It'd be angle FED. Oops. FED. Angle DEF. Angle 2. And angle E. I switched up the letter and the number there, but that's okay. As long as you get all 4 in there, that's fine. And that looks like it's an acute angle. So you're going to have a part on your assignment, I think it's the first part of your assignment, where you have to do this very same thing. Name the angle in 4 ways and then classify what type of angle it is. Number 5 says identify a pair of vertical angles and adjacent angles in the railroad crossing side. So see if you can do that on your own. Start with vertical. Just name 1 pair of vertical angles in there. And then try adjacent as well. Okay, a pair of vertical angles, angles that are directly across from each other. You could go with 3 and 1 angles. 3 and angle 1. Or you could go with 2 and 4. Those would also work. Adjacent angles, there's 4 different combinations. So just 2 angles that are right next to each other. How about angles 2 and 3? If you wrote something else down, as long as they're right next to each other, that's fine. You don't have to change it if you have something different than I do. Okay, and then there's going to be a section on your assignment as well that actually has you find the value of some angles. And some of them are going to be actually tougher than these, but this will give you a start, an idea of the concept of how this works. So it says find the value of x in each figure. So here's x right here. Vertical angles are congruent. They're the same measure. Angles are directly across from each other. So all I have to do is look across from it, find the angle there. So angle x would be 100 degrees, just like that one. A straight line here between these two makes 180 degrees. See the 180? A straight line between these two would make 180 degrees. We'll talk more about that later, but this angle, this part of the angle is just 100 degrees. On number 7 here, you've got 2 angles directly across from each other. Angle x is across from this angle right here, which is 52 degrees. So they're going to be the same measurement. Vertical angles are congruent. Number 8, here's angle x, the one directly across from it. You see if you can figure out what that's going to be. Do 8 and 9 on your own there. See if you can figure out what those are going to be there. So for number 8, kind of already gave it away here a little bit. It's directly across from that one, which is 94 degrees. And then number 9, angle x right here is directly across from this one that says 131. So it's also 131 degrees. Vertical angles are congruent. Now there is going to be a section on your homework which makes this maybe a little bit trickier, which can have multiple angles, and you have to be able to figure out, and you got to use this idea that vertical angles are congruent to be able to come up with them. But I think you guys will be able to do those okay. All right, we're going to stop there, and we'll do some more practice with this, do some work with this in class. I don't know how much more practice we'll do, but we'll do some work with this in class.